Thank you. I want to focus for just a minute on a fourth actor who's not sitting up on the dais, but who is playing an increasingly important role in this field. The other area, of course, where U.S. foreign assistance has just mushroomed and where our government has been deeply involved in the last few years is in areas of post-conflict. And of course, with the military being and the Defense Department being increasingly involved there, we've seen presidential candidates calling for the establishment of a civilian response corps. We have seen the military moving to create an Africa command with a desire to work robustly with civilian capacities in many of the same countries where you're operating. I'm just wondering if you could reflect on how you are currently operating vis-a-vis this important new actor, and whether you have recommendations for the next administration in terms of creating coordinating mechanisms, in terms of the appropriate division of labor, division of capacities, because this is going to be a big issue, I think, for some time to come. So let me put you on the spot, Deputy Administrator Kunder, and I know that AID is deeply involved in many of these places. I'm assuming that the PEPFAR is as well, and I'll really allow you to tell us whether this is an issue for the MCC as well. So.
Lael, thank you for raising the question. If you hadn't, I was going to try to figure out some way to work it into the conversation. I think many of you know I was called back into government service to open the USAID mission in Afghanistan in January 2002, so this is an issue near and dear to my heart. And my day-to-day life as acting deputy administrator is consumed primarily with the level of effort. If I measured my level of effort, is primarily in conflict and post-conflict arena. I live in fear that this administration will leave office without having put in place a solid foundation with the Coordinator for Reconstruction and Stabilization at the State Department, without creating a civilian response corps, and that the next administration will come into office and have to figure out this all over again, and will take a year or two to get its bearings and conduct more workshops like this. If there is one thing that we clearly need to do, is to match the intense interest in the military community in how to manage conflict and post-conflict environments with an increased capacity on the civilian side of the U.S. government. I know that the current concepts might not be perfect, but there's been an awfully lot of work, bipartisan work, impelled early on by Senators Biden and Lugar, taken up by the administration, by the Secretary of State, and we've got the nub of an organization with this Coordinator for Reconstruction and Stabilization Office. I would encourage everybody in this room to make sure that we advance that ball significantly, get the team in place, get some resources behind it, so that we can get that thing off the ground and functioning before the next administration comes into office. I think there's one important lesson that I draw from the military on all of this. The military conceptually, and some of you are familiar with the Goldwater-Nichols Act that reformed the military command and control structure a decade ago. If you don't, I encourage you to do a little research on it. They recognized that in the post-Cold War environment, they would have to be more agile in getting resources to the multiple sources of instability that the international environment was likely to produce. They kept the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. They just figured out how to package their resources and get them to where they needed them in a much more agile fashion. To answer your question directly, Lael, I am not in favor of sort of creating a new department, new agency, new entity. We have considerable resources at state, at USAID, at Treasury, at Justice. What we are on the way to doing but haven't quite got to yet is figuring out how to package those under this CRS structure so that we can quickly mobilize the task-configured teams we need to get to crisis sites quickly. As many of you know, I used to head AID's Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance. On the natural disaster side, we do this quite well as a government. If there's a crisis somewhere around the world tonight, we'll get plastic sheeting there within the next couple of days, no matter how remote the location. We need to take that learning and the military's learning in the Goldwater-Nichols Act and get ourselves a real boost before this administration leaves office, because this is one of the short list of critical items where we've got to build civilian capacity.
I think this is a very important issue, Lael, and I mentioned the impact of HIV/AIDS on peacekeeping forces, and in fact, General Wald and General Jones, the former commanders from Europe, because Africa was covered by Europe before, have said that the third greatest risk to our national security from Africa, behind terrorism and weapons of mass destruction, is HIV/AIDS. And the reason is not only on the peacekeepers, but as I told you about the impact on orphans and teachers and parents, that is a rending of the social fabric and breakdown of communities and social structures in those countries. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that is a great place for people to breed rather rapidly fanaticism and radicalism. And as many of you know, Africa is about 50% Muslim and 50% Christian, so it could be the next proving ground for fundamentalism problems. And so that's why the military, the commanders, actually view HIV/AIDS as a significant risk. And so we actually work very closely with the Department of Defense. The thing about PEPFAR is we are an office of 75 people. We don't implement in my office. We implement through agencies. And getting to this coordination Jim was talking about. And our implementers, our largest ones, are USAID and HHS, but right behind is the Department of Defense and Peace Corps, and Department of Labor a little bit. So Department of Defense is right in the middle of what we do as funded partners to get to the militaries and to provide resources within the militaries for prevention, care, and treatment services. And we have some great programs out there. We are engaged intensively at an interagency approach because we're all working together. And I think that's one of the management innovations of PEPFAR, like bringing the Army, Navy, and Marines together. And we bring together these agencies at the technical level. We have interagency technical working groups for all of our areas. We also have a deputy principals group and a principals group. And DOD is at every level, and I engage with the Assistant Secretary for Health within DOD. So we're a very integrated approach because this is so important, and we'll continue to do that through AFRICOM. There's an interagency working group now to deal with AFRICOM, and we're a part of that. So it's a very important issue, and I think we all need to stay focused on this, and we believe it's important because HIV/AIDS is a security risk, and so does the Department of Defense.
Just to answer very briefly, the MCC initiative is much different than actually USAID and than PEPFAR, so we don't have the degree of engagement with the Department of Defense that my colleagues do. That being said, I have met with the DoD, and we have an ongoing dialogue, certainly to make them aware of the activities that we're involved in the countries in which we are operating. Many of them are not countries that are directly connected to U.S. military engagement or activity, so there isn't a direct overlap. But certainly, not only with the Department of Defense, but with others in the donor community at large, perhaps more significantly, we are looking very, very strongly at ways to coordinate our activities.
Let me ask you about another set of actors who are sitting all around this room. I think in the last decade, we have seen an explosion of involvement in the global poverty agenda by mega philanthropists, by what we like to call philanthropists, celebrities who are really using their rock star appeal to bring the public to the table. We see individual Americans giving at higher levels than ever before, both financially and in terms of their time, through a whole variety of volunteer and service opportunities. I guess a few questions. First, are you seeing the impact of that in terms of congressional support for your programs? Secondly, how do you partner with these organizations? What is the division of labor there in terms of who takes the riskier side of the spectrum, who thinks about sort of longer-term sustainability versus short-term pilots? Are there cases where you actually share leadership or even defer leadership to some of the big private actors? And what are the trends evolving there that, again, the next administration should be aware of so they don't reinvent the wheel? In any order you'd like.